All right, so to determine if the following are possible or not, we have to think of it in terms of the unit circle, and we have to think in terms of where that would live, what quadrant, is there an angle that can support this? Is there a reference angle that can support these values? So the first thing I'm going to, and then we'll verify in the graphing calculator to the best of our ability, okay? So remember, everything goes back to SOHCAHTOA. And remember the reciprocals. Now, the reciprocal one doesn't roll off the tongue as smooth as SOHCAHTOA does. But what is the reciprocal of sine? Cosecant. So I'm going to write cosecant, and that is HO, right? What is the reciprocal of cosine? Secant. And that is H over A. And then the reciprocal of tangent is cotangent, and that is A over O. All right? So where am I going with this? Well, secant is the reciprocal of sine, so then, the reciprocal of cosine. So secant then of theta is actually the hypotenuse over the adjacent. And if we think about this in terms of the xy plane, remember that the hypotenuse is the radius of the unit circle, and the adjacent side of our reference angle will always be the x value. Okay, so now on the unit circle, the radius will be 1. Therefore, if this is a value, my x value would have to be negative 0.998. So that means that my x value has to be negative 998, and my radius is 1. So somewhere over here, now I'm not saying what the y value is. I'm just saying that from here to here, my x value would be equal to negative 0.998. So I'm not drawing to scale. I'm going to over exaggerate what the triangle would look like, but I would have a triangle that kind of looked like this, where my radius would equal 1. Okay? Do I know what the y value is? And remember, this point right here is just my x, comma, y. But I know that my x, in terms of x, comma, y, I know that my x value would be 0.998. Oh, I think I got one more 9 in there, right? And then I got to figure out what my y value would be. So how do I figure this out? Well, we just go x squared plus y squared equals r squared. And if we can get an actual answer, then yeah, it exists. What will probably happen if you can't get an answer is you'll have the square root of a negative number or something wonky like that, and then it can't exist because we can't take the square root of a negative number and have a real solution. So what you do is just plug it in. So I'm going to say negative 0.998. Oh, I keep forgetting that last 9. 999.8 squared plus y squared is equal to 1 squared. So I'm going to use my fancy calculator. Now I'll show you the graph part in a second because you guys had some TI-30s out. And so this part you could do on the TI-30, but we are going to graph some of these things in a second to kind of verify something. So basically what I need to do is I'm going to take in parentheses, negative 0.9998 and square it. I'm going to get some crazy decimal, right? And so that's 0.996 and some change. So this ends up becoming 0.9996 plus y squared equals 1. So now I need to subtract this from both sides. I ran out of room. And I end up with y squared is equal to 0.0004, right? I think. Let's double check on the calculator. So let's do 1 minus whatever that was, 0.9996. And so because this is a positive value, let me change the mode here. Normal, slope. I don't like it like that. Let me do that again. Oh, it's still doing it. Yeah, so trust me, that's it's what I wrote down. Okay. So it'd go 1, it'd be 3 zeros before it. Okay. So now I got to take the square root of that, right, to get my y value. So the answer is yes, it exists. At this point, I don't need to go any further because I have a positive square root. Okay. But let's just do it anyways, just out of curiosity. So if I take the square root of my answer, and it's going to be like 0.0004, it's going to be something 2, right? Yeah. It'll be 0.02. Okay. And that's an approximation because Mr. Adams did some rounding. So I'm going to write that down and just say that this is yes. Now what will happen when on one of these, we're going to go through and crank through this process, and we'll get a negative number here when we go to take the square root, and that won't exist. Yes?
How do you fix that? Like when you got 4 e minus 4.
Yeah, so that's I'll show you that in a second. Okay, let's finish this problem. There's some settings in the mode of the calculator where you could do scientific notation. Mine was set to normal, but it was also set to auto, so it's probably because it was a smaller number. You got to turn that auto feature off. I'll show you how to do that after the video. Okay. All right, so now here's the beauty of this. Is sine of this number possible? So I'm going to jump down here to sine and do this one because we know what y is, right? We said that y was equal to 0.02. So sine is possible because we're going to use the same triangle, right? We would say that sine, well, let's look. Oh, maybe it's not. So sine of theta, shoot, it might not work. Let me think this through. So it's the opposite over the hypotenuse, which is actually y over r. And on the unit circle, r is 1, right? For y, we get negative 0.998. Okay, so that would be a different scenario, and I'll just sketch that over here. I'm going to zoom in too because I'm starting to run out of real estate on this bad boy. So somewhere over here, I'm going to say, all right, I've got my xy plane. Where is y negative? Well, somewhere, y is negative down here somewhere. So the triangle could be here or the triangle could be here. It doesn't matter. But what we got to do is see if it's possible. Now, really, truth be told, my x value, when we crank through all the math, because the y value is going to be on this side, I'm going to get the same x value, right? So if I crank, in other words, well, I'll just write it out and show you. So this is same scenario, x squared plus y squared equals r squared. We can exist on the unit circle where the radius is 1, and then we know that y squared ends up becoming 9996, right? Because you're going to end up squaring this value, and you have x squared. And so then what you end up doing is you have x squared is equal to 1 minus this stuff, 0.996. And so then x squared ends up becoming 0.0004. And then when you take the square root of both sides, you get 0.02. Okay? Now, technically, when you take the square root of both sides, your x value can be positive or negative 0.02. And that would satisfy this requirement, because I could have a negative x value over here or a positive x value over here. So this one is yes. And we'll verify all these in a second. Now, tangent of 4 million, tangent of theta of 4 million, that one's a little trickier, because remember, tangent of theta is equal to the opposite over the adjacent, which is technically y over x in the xy plane. And so can I have a ratio between these two that is 4 million? That's the real question. Okay. So how would we determine that? That one's really hard. So let's go back and verify some of these things. I'm going to show you how to do this on the calculator. This one, really what we're saying is there's a value of y that exists and a value of x that exists, that when you take y and divide it by x, you're left with 4 million. So that would be, and you could do, what would you do? You could do 36 million divided by 9, right? So we got to look at this and see if they exist. So one way to do this is graphing. So what I want you to do is I want you to grab those fancy calculators that I gave you guys. And I want you to hit this y equals button. And then you got to clear this out. Some of you guys will probably have some stuff left over from my other classes. So when you hit y equals, make sure that all this stuff is cleared out. Just hit the clear button. Okay. And then you'll probably will have something that doesn't look like this. So scroll over using the left arrow key, and then you hit your enter button. Now on the older calculators, you just toggle through by hitting enter, and it has these different images. Just keep hitting enter until you have a straight line. Okay? Now I'll wait till you're done with that. Now, remember, secant was the reciprocal of cosine. So we're going to check the first one. So when I say the reciprocal of cosine, and there's another way to check this too, and I'll show you in a second here. So the reciprocal of cosine, so I would graph 1 divided by cosine, and we'll plug in x instead of theta. And then once you plug this in, I'll give you guys a second. Just kind of show me your calculator once you have this set up like how I have mine set up, and then I'll know when to go to the next And then we said that it will equal, and you have to hit this button right here for the negative. See the button that's in red? That's the one you have to hit for the negative, and then you put 0.9998. Okay? And then I'll show you a third way to double check this, which is a little easier. All right, so I'm going to hit graph. And so the other thing you want to do is click on this zoom button and see option number 7 where it says Z trig. Hit that one. There we go. So you're going to hit zoom, scroll down to option number 7, and it'll say Z trig. And these are preset windows. Basically, we're zooming in and out on the graph. Trig functions are usually, they have a range, like sine and cosine. You guys don't know this yet, but they have a range of -1 to 1 unless you transform them. And so when you hit graph, do you see how this red line touches the blue line? You guys see that? That red line represents y equals -9 or 0.9998. And so because they intersect, there is a value that exists that will give us the answer. Okay? That's one way to check it. Right? Now, let's go back and double check it for sine. So go back to y equals. And we're going to clear out this first one, and we're just going to say sine of x. And when you graph that, that's what, when you graph the function sine of x, it looks like this. Again, that red line intersects the blue line. And we could zoom in more to see it, but you could see clearly it intersects that blue line. So that does exist. I'm not going to do it today, but there is a way to see exactly where they intersect at. Okay? Now for the next one, this one's going to be tricky. So we're going to go back to y equals, and now we're going to do the tangent one. So we're going to say tangent of x, but what do you think I'm going to plug in here? How about 4 million? Now we're going to have a problem with this one because our window isn't set for 4 million. So once you guys have your screen, I'm going to give you guys a couple of seconds to plug this in. Now what we need to do is we're going to click on this button here that says window. Everybody look at the screen real quick. There's a button up here that says window. When you click on that, we're going to go down to y minimum. And I'm going to type in, this is tricky, 3,999,999. And then here I'm going to put 4,000,001. So I'm doing this because we're going to draw a horizontal line right at 4 million. And so I want to be a little bit below and a little bit above that line. So I'll give you guys a second to enter that information in.
My top number is supposed to be the same.
No, these don't matter as much. You don't need to change these. What are your numbers?
-352.5 and then 352.7.
Change them to 360. -360 and +360. All right, go ahead. We're going to hit graph. You guys ready? Watch this. Nothing up my sleeve. Maybe we need to zoom out in the X direction. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to put in negative 2,000 and positive 2,000. Graph. What do you guys see? Is there anything intersecting it? You got a line? I think it's just taking my calculator a long time. On your guys' older calculators, it's probably doing a little bit better job. Yeah, there you go. I just had to zoom out a little bit. Okay. So what this means is, yeah, there's an angle that exists, right? So if I go down this line, whoops, there's a big angle that exists where you can get that. So let me see if I got to be in degree mode. It should be a tighter one than that, though. Well, no, that makes sense. Yeah, it'd have to be a really big degree. Huh. So there is a value that exists. It's just crazy, right? So this represents the angle. Let me check and see what mode I'm in. Yeah, I'm in degree mode. So that exists. Now, here's the thing that's going to be weird, though. When I go, let's hit second mode, and that takes you to the home screen. If I hit second and see the sign button above it in blue, it says arc sine. Click on that and then put in the negative 0.9998. That's the angle, negative 88.85. If we do cosine, no, wait, it was, what was it again? It wasn't cosine, it was secant, which is the reciprocal of sine, right? So we're going to have to do the reciprocal of this. I don't know, how would you do the arc? Well, let's do tangent. This is the interesting thing about tangent. If I do tangent and I plug in 4 million, (90 degrees), which makes sense because we have this crazy graph. Like, I bet you if you divide whatever that value was, 2100 or whatever. So let me do this. I think it's probably like 2100. No, it was 2180. What did we say it was? Let's just hit trace and see. 2181. Let's calculate. Watch this. I'm going to calculate it. Here's a little thing if you guys want to follow along. If you hit second trace and it says calculate, this is how we actually find the intersection. So my first curve, boy, this is going to be crazy. There it is. Yeah, it's too big of a number for the calculator to calculate, but this is the answer right here. It's got to be like, I don't know, some multiple of 90 is the 21. What did they say it was, 2181 or something like that? Let's do cosecant is secant is a hard one because it's not quite the same. You would have to reciprocate. So, anyways,